poor girl offered to help a millionaire CEO with a small favor, unaware it would lead to a partnership. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The rain had been falling for hours, turning the sidewalks into shimmering mirrors that reflected every passing headlight. Under the awning of a quiet bus stop, Ava Collins pulled her thin jacket tighter around her body, willing the cold to stay out. The night felt heavy, like the kind that pressed down on a person's shoulders, reminding them of everything they were trying so hard to outrun. She checked the time on her cracked phone screen, her breath fogging in the damp air. Another missed bus, another shift she might not make tomorrow if she caught a cold tonight. But Ava stayed anyway, partly because home wasn't much warmer, partly because waiting was something life had trained her to be good at. The soft echo of hurried footsteps broke through the sound of rain. A man approached, tall, dressed neatly though his shirt clung to him from the storm. His gaze swept the dark street before landing on Ava, and for a moment, she saw something unexpected, unease, as if he wasn't used to being the one asking for help. "Excuse me," he said, voice low but steady. I need a small favor." Ava blinked, unsure if he was talking to her. People didn't usually choose the girl in worn sneakers and a thrift store jacket when they needed something important. But he stepped closer, careful, polite. "Could you hold this for a moment?" He offered a leather portfolio, rain droplets sliding off the edges. "I need to make a quick call, and I can't let this get wet. It's important." She hesitated, not because she feared him, but because the request felt too strange, too out of place in her life of minimum wage routines and scraping by days. Yet something about his voice, earnest, almost hopeful, made her nod. "Sure," she said softly. He exhaled in visible relief, handing her the portfolio as though entrusting her with something far more valuable than paper. Ava held it close, shielding it from the rain as he stepped away to find a clearer signal. She didn't open it. She didn't even adjust her grip. She simply protected it because someone had asked, and kindness, however small, was something she still believed in offering. Minutes later, he returned, rain in his hair, gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you," he murmured, taking the portfolio back with careful hands. "You may have saved my night." She smiled faintly, unaware that this single act, this simple favor offered on a stormy night, would become the first thread in a partnership that neither of them could have imagined. And somewhere in the dark behind him, the city lights flickered like they knew a story had just begun. By the time Ava reached her small apartment on the second floor of an old building, the rain had eased into a gentle drizzle that tapped softly against the narrow stairwell window. She pushed open her door, greeted by the familiar scent of old carpet and the faint hum of a heater that only worked when it felt generous. Ava set her bag on the rickety table and sank into the single chair beside it, letting out a breath she had been holding since the bus stop. The encounter replayed in her mind with surprising clarity. The man's calm voice, the way he handled the portfolio like it carried the weight of something important, the quiet gratitude in his eyes. She had offered help before, in small ways, but this felt different. She could not explain why. She kicked off her wet shoes and pulled the thin blanket from the couch, wrapping it around her shoulders. Her phone buzzed with a reminder for tomorrow's shift at the diner, and she stared at it for a long moment before silencing it. A long day awaited her, same as always. Yet something in her chest felt unsettled, as if the night had brushed against a part of her life she did not expect to wake up. Across town, Ethan Ward sat in the back seat of a sleek black sedan, the city lights streaking across the windows like golden ribbons. The portfolio rested on his lap, its edges still faintly marked by rain. His assistant, who had been calling him repeatedly for the past hour, finally received a brief message saying everything was handled. But Ethan's mind was not on work. He could not shake the image of the young woman at the bus stop, standing there with quiet resilience, shielding his documents without knowing why they mattered. Most people he dealt with every day wanted something from him. That woman had wanted nothing at all. When he arrived at his penthouse, he paused at the door longer than usual, holding the portfolio a little tighter. He wondered if he should have asked her name. Back in her apartment, Ava finally lay down, staring at the ceiling where shadows danced from the passing headlights outside. The night had been ordinary in every way except one. She replayed the man's softened smile when he took back the portfolio, the sense that he carried burdens she could not see. She pushed the thought aside, reminding herself she would likely never see him again. People like him belonged to a world she only glimpsed from the outside. But even so, a small spark lingered in her chest, warm enough to soften the cold edges of her evening. As she drifted to sleep, the rain eased completely, leaving the city wrapped in a quiet stillness, as if holding its breath for whatever would unfold next. The morning came with a thin line of sunlight slipping through the crooked blinds, landing across Ava's face just enough to wake her. She blinked, disoriented for a moment, before the familiar chill of her small apartment settled around her. The heater had shut off again during the night, leaving the air cool enough to make her pull the blanket closer as she sat up. Her phone vibrated with a notification from the diner reminding her of the early shift, and she let out a soft sigh before heading to the tiny kitchen that barely held a coffee maker and a single chipped mug. As the coffee brewed, she stood quietly, replaying the night before in her mind. She could still see the rain glistening on the man's shoulders, hear the steady calm in his voice. It was strange how a moment that should have been forgettable refused to fade. She shook the thought away as she grabbed her bag, locking the door behind her. The world outside was brisk and bright, the kind of morning that made the city feel sharper, noisier, more awake. Then she felt. By the time she reached the diner, her manager was already calling her name, waving a stack of receipts in her direction. "We have a rush coming in 30 minutes, he said. "I need you on register." Ava nodded, offering a polite smile before slipping behind the counter. She had learned how to blend in here, how to move with enough speed to avoid complaints and enough silence to avoid unnecessary attention. Yet as she rang up orders and wiped down counters, her mind drifted back to the leather portfolio she had held so carefully under the bus stop lights. Meanwhile, across the city, Ethan stood in a glass-walled conference room on the 27th floor of WardTech headquarters. The skyline stretched endlessly behind him, but he barely noticed it. His team spoke around him, presenting updates and projections, yet his thoughts wandered back to the woman who had helped him the night before. The memory of her kindness kept resurfacing, quiet but insistent. When the meeting ended, Ethan remained by the window, his reflection faint in the glass. For years he had built a life where everything was calculated, structured, guarded. Last night had disrupted that without warning. His assistant's voice broke through his thoughts. "Sir, the board wants you in the afternoon briefing. Should I schedule it?" Ethan straightened, nodding, though his mind was elsewhere. It bothered him that he did not know her name. It bothered him even more that he cared. Back at the diner, the lunch rush eased, leaving Ava a few minutes to breathe. She slipped into the back hallway to restock napkins, pausing when a sudden wave of fatigue hit her. Between extra shifts and rent deadlines, she had been running on fumes. Still, she pushed through, the way she always did. As she returned to the counter, the bell above the door chimed softly. Ava glanced up, expecting another customer, but instead her breath caught. Standing just inside the entrance, scanning the room with familiar, searching eyes, was the man from the bus stop. Ethan Ward did not yet see her, but the moment felt suspended, like the city itself had paused. Ava's heart fluttered, not with fear, but with the distinct sense that her ordinary life was about to tilt in a direction she had never prepared for. For a brief moment, Ava could not tell if she was imagining him. The diner lights reflected softly off the polished floor, casting a glow that made Ethan Ward look almost out of place among the laminated menus and humming coffee machines. He stood near the door with a careful kind of stillness, as if he did not want to disrupt the rhythm of the room, but his eyes moved with quiet intent as he searched each face. When they finally landed on hers, something subtle shifted in his expression, a relief so gentle it almost went unnoticed. Ava froze, her hand still resting on the register as Ethan walked toward her. He was dressed differently now, crisp and composed, the kind of effortless refinement that made people stare without meaning to. Yet his voice, when he spoke, carried the same sincerity she remembered from the rainy night. "I hoped I would find you," he said softly. For a second, Ava forgot how to breathe. Me? She managed, trying to sound steady. Why? Ethan's gaze warmed. I wanted to thank you properly. Last night, you helped me more than you realize. She shook her head quickly, brushing off the idea. It was nothing. You just needed someone to hold something for a minute. Most people would not have, he replied. You did. Before she could respond, her manager called her name sharply from across the room. Ava flinched, instinctively stepping back into employee mode. I am sorry, she whispered. I need to get back to work. Ethan glanced at the bustling tables, then back at her. I understand. I will not keep you long. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small business card, placing it gently on the counter between them. If you ever need anything, or if you would allow me to return the kindness, even in a small way, call this number. Ava stared at the card. Ethan Ward. Ward Tech Innovations. Chief Executive Officer. The letters blurred for a moment as her mind tried to reconcile the polished title with the rain-soaked man from the bus stop. She swallowed. You are a CEO? He hesitated, almost sheepish, as if he wished the title mattered less than it did. Yes, but last night, that was not what mattered. A customer stepped up behind her, clearing his throat impatiently. Ava forced a courteous smile, rang up the order, and handed back the change with practiced efficiency. When she looked up again, Ethan was still there, his expression calm but hopeful. I know this is unexpected, he said quietly, but I meant what I said. Thank you. She nodded, unable to form anything more than that. He turned to leave, pushing the door open as a small gust of cool air drifted inside. Ava watched his silhouette fade into the afternoon sunlight, the business card still lying on the counter, a sharp contrast to the dull laminate beneath it. She tucked it carefully into her apron pocket, her heart beating a little faster than before. She told herself it did not mean anything, that people like him did not cross paths with people like her for long. Yet a whisper of possibility lingered, soft but insistent, as if the universe had nudged two worlds just close enough to touch. The rest of Ava's shift moved in a blur, each order and receipt blending into the next, yet nothing could quiet the steady thrum beneath her ribs. The business card in her apron pocket felt heavier than its size, a small rectangle that seemed to tilt her entire day off its usual axis. When she finally clocked out, the sun had begun to lean toward the horizon, casting a warm glow over the city sidewalks. Ava stepped outside and paused, letting the late afternoon air cool her flushed cheeks. She pulled out the card again, turning it over between her fingers as though it might reveal something she had missed earlier. The name, the title, the company logo, all too polished, too foreign compared to her world of dish soap, tip jars, and 20-minute lunch breaks. Part of her wanted to tuck it away forever, pretend it did not exist, pretend that moments like the one she had shared with Ethan Ward only happened in movies. But another part, quiet and persistent, wondered why a man like him would go out of his way to find her. She began the walk home, weaving past storefronts and street vendors calling out the last of their deals. Her mind drifted back to the way Ethan had looked at her, not with pity or impatience, but with genuine gratitude. It had been a long time since anyone looked at her like that. By the time she climbed the narrow stairs to her apartment, the sky had shifted to a deep orange. Inside, she dropped her keys on the counter, opened the small window to let in the evening breeze, and sat at her table with the card placed directly in front of her. She traced the embossed letters with her thumb. She remembered the rain sliding down his hair, the earnestness in his voice, the moment he said, "Most people would not have." She whispered into the quiet, "Why did you?" Meanwhile, across the river, Ethan stepped into his private office as the city lights flickered alive outside the tall windows. His day had been a parade of decisions, presentations, and meetings, yet none of it lingered in his thoughts the way the look on Ava's face had when she saw his card. He set his coat on the chair and loosened his tie as he replayed the moment he walked into the diner. He had expected her to be surprised. He had not expected his own reaction. There had been something grounding about seeing her behind that counter, moving with careful determination despite the weight she carried. Ethan had spent years surrounded by people who edited their personality to fit whatever they thought he wanted. Ava did not pretend. She did not calculate. She simply existed in a way that felt honest. He sat at his desk, glancing at the clock, wondering if he had overwhelmed her, wondering if she believed he genuinely wanted to repay her kindness, not as a transaction, but as something more human. In her apartment, Ava finally tucked the card into the side pocket of her bag, deciding she would forget about it for now. But as she turned off the lights and lay down, she knew she was lying to herself. The card remained in her thoughts, glowing faintly in the dark like a door she was afraid to open yet unable to walk away from. And somewhere across the city, Ethan felt the same pull, a quiet certainty that their paths had crossed for a reason neither of them fully understood yet. The next morning arrived softly, with a pale gold light spreading across Ava's small apartment like a quiet reminder that life kept moving, whether she was ready or not. She dressed for her shift, tying her apron with automatic motions, but her mind drifted in places far from the diner. The business card felt like a weight in her bag, heavier each time. She glanced at it, as if it carried a possibility she was not sure she was allowed to want. By the time she reached the diner, the city was awake and bustling, morning commuters streaming past her with coffee cups and determined strides. Inside, the usual clatter of dishes and the low hum of conversation greeted her, yet everything felt slightly tilted, as if her world refused to settle back into its usual shape. During a short lull, Ava stepped into the break room to refill the napkin dispensers. Her coworker Jenna leaned against the counter, sipping a soda. "You okay?" Jenna asked. "You look like you have been thinking hard about something." Ava offered a small smile. "Just tired." But Jenna raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. Tired does not make someone stare into space like they just saw a ghost. Before Ava could reply, the bell above the front door chimed faintly, but she ignored it and focused on stacking the napkins neatly, trying to steady her thoughts. Meanwhile, in the lobby of Ward Tech Innovations, Ethan crossed the marble floor with a deliberate pace. His assistant hurried beside him, reading off his schedule for the day. Meetings, calls, project reviews, a press briefing. All important, all expected. Yet none of them were the reason he arrived early, wearing a thoughtful expression that did not belong to the efficient so everyone knew. He paused near the elevator. "Hold the morning briefing," he said suddenly. His assistant blinked. "Sir? The entire team is waiting." Ethan's voice remained calm but firm. "I need to make a stop first." The assistant hesitated but nodded, accustomed enough to his rare but unshakable instincts to not question them further. In the diner, Ava returned to the counter just as a familiar presence slipped into her awareness. She did not need to look up to know who it was. Something in the air shifted, subtle yet undeniable, and when she finally lifted her eyes, Ethan Ward stood a few steps away. He looked different in the morning light, sharper, more crisp in a tailored suit, but the warmth in his expression had not changed. That was what startled her most. People like him did not usually look at people like her that way. "Good morning, Ava," he said, his voice steady but gentle, as if he understood she might bolt if he spoke too abruptly. Her heart skipped. "Good morning," she replied softly. "I did not expect to see you again." "I hoped you would not mind," he said. "There is something I would like to ask you." Her breath caught before she managed a steady tone. "Ask me." He nodded, glancing briefly at the bustling diner around them. "Not here. If you have a break soon, could we talk outside?" Ava hesitated. She feared attention, judgment, the widening gap between their worlds. But she also sensed something genuine in him, something beyond the polished title and the expensive suit. And against her better judgment, curiosity tugged at her. "I have a break in 10 minutes, she said quietly. His shoulders eased, as though that simple answer meant more than she could understand. "I will be outside," he said. When he stepped out into the sunlight, Ava stood still for a moment, her pulse quickening with a mix of uncertainty and a strange, growing anticipation. Whatever he wanted to ask, she knew it would change something. She just did not know how much. "I'm stepping out on break," Ava told her manager, her voice steady even though her pulse fluttered with a strange mix of nerves and anticipation. She wiped her hands on her apron, untied it quickly, and slipped out the diner's glass door into the late morning light. Ethan was waiting near the corner, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed, but eyes focused on her in a way that made the noise of the street fade just a little. "Thank you for coming out," he said. "I know you are busy." Ava gave a small, unsure smile. "It is all right. What did you want to ask me?" Ethan studied her face for a moment, as if choosing his next words carefully. "Last night, and today, you have offered kindness with no expectation attached. That is not something I encounter often. She shifted, not knowing how to respond. Compliments were rare in her world, and one spoken this sincerely felt almost too heavy to hold. I did not do anything special, she murmured. You did, he insisted gently. More than you know. He pulled a folded sheet of paper from inside his suit jacket, not a portfolio this time, but something far simpler. I have been working on a community development project. It is meant to help small businesses, local artists, people with ideas, but not resources. Ava blinked, startled by the unexpected subject. That sounds meaningful, she said carefully. It could be, he replied. But my team is missing something. A perspective I cannot seem to find among the people who already work with me. He held her gaze. Your perspective. Ava froze, her breath hitching as the words settled into her. My perspective? Yes, he said. When I spoke to you last night, and again today, I realized you see the world differently. You notice things that people in my circle overlook. She took a tiny step back, overwhelmed. But I am not qualified. I do not have any degree for things like this. Ethan shook his head gently. I am not asking for credentials. I am asking for insight. A fresh pair of eyes. Someone who understands what real challenges look like. His voice softened. Someone like you. The sincerity in his tone pressed against her uncertainty, but fear rose just as quickly. What if I say something wrong? What if I do not help at all? Then we adjust, he said. Partnerships are built on trial and error, not perfection. The word partnership made her heart skip. Not the corporate kind, but the human possibility woven into it. You would really want my help? She whispered. Yes, he answered without hesitation. Not out of obligation. Not as a favor. But because I believe you can offer something valuable. A quiet moment stretched between them, the city humming softly in the background as Ava took in the weight of what he was offering. Across her life, doors had always been something other people walked through. She had only ever stood beside them. Now, for the first time, one had opened for her. Ethan searched her expression gently. You do not need to answer now. I just wanted you to know the opportunity is real. Ava nodded slowly, her voice barely above a breath. I will think about it. Ethan smiled, a warm, relieved curve of his lips. That is all I could ask. As he stepped back, giving her space, the morning light caught the edges of his suit and made him look impossibly out of place in her simple world. Yet somehow, he did not feel out of reach. Ava returned inside the diner moments later, her heartbeat still unsteady, her mind racing in a way it never had before. For the first time, in a long time, something in her life felt like it might be shifting toward the extraordinary, even if she was not sure she was ready to believe it. Ava spent the rest of her shift moving through the diner as if she were balancing on a tightrope, each step steady, but every thought trembling beneath the surface. She wiped tables, refilled coffee, and greeted customers with her usual soft smile. Yet her mind replayed Ethan's offer again and again, each repetition making the world feel slightly unreal. When the lunch rush ended, Jenna nudged her lightly. You have been spaced out all day? Are you sure everything is all right? Ava forced a small laugh. I am fine. Just have a lot on my mind. Jenna eyed her suspiciously, but let it go. As soon as her shift ended, Ava stepped outside, the late afternoon breeze brushing against her skin. She walked home slowly, her thoughts swirling like leaves in a restless wind. The idea of helping a CEO, of being asked for her insight, felt far too big. She had lived her life in small spaces, measured in tip jars and hours on her feet. How was she supposed to belong in boardrooms or conversations about community development? Yet somewhere beneath the fear lingered a quiet spark, the sense that Ethan truly meant what he said. Across town, Ethan stood in a conference room surrounded by executives debating charts and projections. Their voices blended into a dull background hum as he reviewed the notes from his community project. Something was missing, something foundational. He kept thinking of Ava, of the way she observed without embellishing, of the honesty in her voice when she spoke. His assistant approached him after the meeting, holding a tablet. Sir, the board wants to know if you have selected the advisory candidate you mentioned. Ethan hesitated. Not yet. His assistant gave a curious look. May I ask who you are considering? Ethan paused, then answered truthfully. Someone who understands the people we are trying to help. It was all he said, but it was enough to make his assistant blink. That evening, Ava sat at her small table, a bowl of soup cooling untouched in front of her. Bills lay scattered across the surface, reminders of reality tugging at her sleeves. She lifted the business card again, running her thumb along the embossed logo. That spark inside her flickered with each breath. What if I am not meant for things like this? She whispered to the empty room. But then she remembered the way Ethan looked at her, not with pity but with recognition, as if he saw something she had spent years trying to keep alive in herself. Her phone buzzed suddenly, startling her. A new message. Unknown number. This is Ethan. Please do not feel pressured. I only wanted you to know that your voice matters. Whenever you are ready to talk, I will make time. Ava's heart tightened. He had not demanded, insisted, or persuaded. He simply offered space. She typed slowly, unsure, then deleted the words. She set the phone down, pressing her palms against the table. Outside her window, the city lights shimmered like tiny beacons calling her towards something unfamiliar. She felt fear, yes, but also the beginnings of courage, fragile yet unmistakably there. And for the first time, she wondered what might happen if she chose not to let that courage fade. Ava did not sleep much that night. Every time she closed her eyes, her mind replayed Ethan's message, soft but steady, as if it carried a weight meant to anchor the parts of her life that always felt unsteady. When dawn finally crept through the blinds, she felt both restless and strangely clear, as though her thoughts had settled into something resembling direction. After her shift at the diner, she walked home with her hands tucked into her jacket pockets, the cool air brushing against her cheeks. The streets were alive with their usual noise, but she barely heard it. She kept thinking of the way Ethan spoke about the project, about needing a perspective grounded in reality. She wondered if she had that perspective, or if he had simply imagined value where there was none. By the time she reached her apartment, she had almost convinced herself to let the whole idea go. But when she placed her keys on the counter, her phone buzzed with another message. It was from Jenna. Turn on the news. Something about Ward Tech. Ava hesitated, then unlocked her phone and clicked into the local news stream. A headline appeared alongside a photo of Ethan at a recent conference. Ward Tech Community Project faces internal disputes. She clicked on the story, her pulse quickening. The report mentioned disagreements within the company's leadership team, delays in planning, and conflicting views on the project's direction. It explained why Ethan seemed frustrated, even weighed down, beneath his calm exterior. Ava set the phone down, feeling a tug in her chest. For the first time, she understood the scope of what he was facing. Later that evening, as she sat at her small table staring at the business card once again, something inside her shifted. She picked up her phone before fear could talk her out of it and typed slowly. If your offer still stands, I would like to talk. She stared at the message for several long seconds, her thumb hovering over the send button until she finally pressed it. The moment it sent, her heart raced. She stood up and paced the room, her breath uneven, unsure if she had just made a mistake or taken the first step toward a life she had never imagined. It only took a minute for a reply. It absolutely still stands. When would you like to meet? His response was quick, but not pushy, warm without being presumptuous. Ava exhaled, grounding herself as she typed back. Tomorrow afternoon, if that works. It works, Ethan replied. I will pick you up wherever you feel comfortable. She looked around her apartment, at the peeling paint on the cabinets and the old carpet, and shook her head gently. She typed, I will meet you outside the diner. Perfect, he responded. Thank you for giving this a chance. Ava set down her phone, her hands slightly trembling, not from fear this time, but from the gravity of possibility. Tomorrow, she would face a world she had never stepped into before. And somewhere across the city, Ethan leaned back in his office chair, rereading her message with a quiet, relieved smile, knowing the project finally had a missing piece. And perhaps, so did he. The next afternoon arrived with a brightness that felt almost symbolic, as if the city itself sensed that something in Ava's life was shifting. She stood outside the diner, smoothing the front of her apron-free outfit, a simple blouse and jeans, the best she had. Her hands fidgeted with the strap of her bag as she waited. When a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb, her breath caught. Ethan stepped out, not with the stiff formality she had expected from a CEO, but with a quiet warmth, as though he wanted to meet her where she stood rather than tower above her world. Thank you for meeting me, he said, offering a gentle smile. Are you ready? She nodded, though nerves fluttered wildly in her chest. He opened the passenger door for her, and as she settled inside, she took in the calm interior, the soft leather, the faint scent of cedar. Nothing about it felt familiar, yet for some reason, it did not frighten her the way she had imagined. The drive across the city passed in a blur of passing traffic and warm sunlight streaming through the windows. Ethan glanced over occasionally, careful not to overwhelm her, giving her space to breathe. "I want you to know," he said softly. "There is no expectation today. I simply want to hear your thoughts. Whatever you feel comfortable sharing is enough." Ava appreciated the reassurance more than she could express. When they arrived at Ward Tech headquarters, she stared up at the tall glass building rising into the sky. It seemed impossibly large, like something built for lives far bigger than hers. Ethan noticed her hesitation and slowed his pace. "It is just a building," he said gently. "The voices inside are what matter, and yours belongs here." His words steadied her more than he realized. Inside the lobby, polished floors reflected beams of sunlight, and the air carried the subtle scent of fresh greenery from towering indoor plants. Employees passed with brisk strides, greeting Ethan with respect, though he acknowledged each person with calm humility. They reached a private conference room on the 15th floor, a space filled with whiteboards, charts, and a large table scattered with documents from the community project. Ethan gestured toward a chair. "Please, make yourself comfortable." Ava sat slowly, her palms pressed against her knees as she scanned the room. She saw graphs showing neighborhood demographics, lists of potential partners, estimates for resource allocation, but she also saw something missing, something obvious to her life, but perhaps invisible to those who lived in boardrooms. Ethan sat across from her, attentive, patient. "Whenever you are ready," he said. She took a breath. "You have numbers and projections and plans, but you do not have people." Ethan leaned forward, genuinely listening. "Explain. You have ideas for what communities need," she continued softly. "But I do not see anything here that came from the communities themselves. No feedback, no stories, no voices." He looked at the documents, then back at her with growing realization. "You are right," he murmured. "We made assumptions. We did not ask. People do not trust a project that decides for them instead of with them." Ava said, her confidence strengthening. "You need to talk to them, understand them, meet them where they are." Ethan let the silence stretch, absorbing her words. Then he nodded slowly, almost reverently. "Ava, this is exactly what we needed." She felt her cheeks warm. "I just said what I saw. And what you saw," he said, "is what no one in this building has been able to see for months." For the first time, Ava felt the gravity of the role he had offered her. She was not here out of charity or luck. She was here because he believed she could change something. And somehow, sitting in that sunlit room with a man who listened to her, as if her words mattered, she began to believe it too. Ava was still speaking when she noticed Ethan watching her with a look she had not seen before, a mixture of realization and something quieter, something almost protective. Before she could decipher it, the conference room door swung open and two senior executives stepped inside without knocking. Their eyes flicked to her with thinly veiled confusion before turning to Ethan. "We did not know you were in a meeting," one of them said, though his tone suggested otherwise. The other executive offered a polite but strained smile. "Sir, the board is waiting for an update. They expected the community outline this afternoon." Ethan straightened, smoothing the papers in front of him. "We will provide an update," he said calmly. "But not the outline you have seen." Both men exchanged a look. "What does that mean?" Ethan's voice remained even, controlled. "It means we have been approaching the project incorrectly. We made assumptions without engaging the people the project is meant to serve." Their confusion deepened. "With respect, sir, this initiative has been planned for months by trained professionals. We cannot pivot based on an outsider's impression." The word outsider struck Ava like a physical blow, even though no one laid a hand on her. She lowered her gaze, gripping her notebook tightly. Ethan's expression hardened just enough to make the room still. "Her perspective," he said, "is exactly what we have been missing." The executives blinked, stunned. "Sir, she is not part of the company. She is part of the solution," Ethan replied. The quiet finality in his tone left no room for debate. One executive cleared his throat, clearly torn between objection and caution. "The board will not accept an unvetted individual in the advisory process. They will see it as a risk." Ethan held their gaze. Then I will take responsibility for that risk. The room fell silent. The authority in his voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a man accustomed to being both challenged and obeyed. After a tense pause, the executives nodded stiffly and stepped out, closing the door behind them. Ava exhaled slowly, unaware she had been holding her breath. I am sorry, she whispered. I did not mean to cause trouble. Ethan shook his head. You did not cause trouble. You revealed the truth. She hesitated. They do not want me involved. He leaned forward, his voice firm but gentle. I do. And I am the one leading this project. She looked at him, searching his face for anything that might hint at doubt, but there was none. Why are you doing this? She asked softly. He paused before answering. Because you see value where others see numbers. Because you listen before you speak. Because you understand how decisions affect real lives. And because someone who offers help in the rain without asking what is in it for them is someone I want in the room when we decide how to help others. Her chest tightened with emotion she did not know how to name. Gratitude. Confusion. A fragile, growing hope. Ethan gently pushed a folder toward her. Take this home tonight. Look it over. Write down anything you think we are missing. Tomorrow, you and I will present a revised approach to the board. Ava stared at the folder, then at him. You want me to present with you? Yes, he said simply. Your voice deserves to be heard. The afternoon sun streamed across the table, catching the edges of the folder in a warm glow. For the first time in her life, Ava felt the possibility of purpose settling on her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a beginning. Ava spent the entire evening at her small kitchen table, a project. Folder open beneath the warm glow of a lamp that flickered every few minutes. The pages were filled with charts, proposals, and neighborhood statistics, all organized with the precision of people who viewed communities from 30 floors above street level. She read each page slowly, her pencil tapping rhythmically against the table as she searched for what was missing. By the time midnight brushed against her window, she had filled an entire notebook with observations, questions, and suggestions. She did not know if any of it was good enough, but she knew it was honest. That had to count for something. When morning came, she dressed carefully, choosing the neatest outfit she owned, smoothing the fabric until her hands stopped shaking. She carried the folder against her chest as she walked toward Ward Tech, the tall glass building catching the early sun like it had been dipped in gold. The moment she stepped into the lobby, her heart fluttered. People in suits moved purposefully through the space, their polished shoes tapping against the marble floor. She felt impossibly small, but she reminded herself of Ethan's words. Your voice deserves to be heard. He was waiting near the elevator, dressed in a crisp gray suit, but his expression softened when he saw her. Good morning, Ava, he said. You made it. She nodded. I brought everything I worked on. Good, he replied with a gentle smile. You will do great. They rode the elevator to the executive floor, and with each passing level, her stomach tightened. When they entered the boardroom, 12 members of the executive committee sat around a curved table, their attention shifting toward her with curious skepticism. Ava tried to steady her breath as Ethan stepped forward. Before we begin, he said, I want to reframe this meeting. Today is not about defending old plans. It is about seeing what we have missed. He turned to Ava. And Ava Collins is here to show us that. Murmurs spread around the table, but Ethan gestured to the open seat beside him, inviting her into a space she never imagined occupying. Ava stood, her hands trembling slightly as she opened her notebook. Thank you, she began, her voice soft but clear. I know I am not who you usually expect to see in this room, but I read the proposal, and I think something important is missing. She pointed to a chart on the projector. You have data about these neighborhoods, but not their stories. You have estimates, but not their voices. People will not trust something built for them unless they feel they are part of it. The room went silent. Even the air felt still. Ava continued, gaining strength as she spoke. You need listening sessions, community visits, partnerships with local leaders. You need to show people you see them, not just the blocks on a map where they live. One board member leaned forward, folding his hands. And you believe this approach will increase participation? Not just participation, Ava replied. Ownership. People support what they help build. Ethan watched her with quiet pride, his eyes steady and encouraging. Another executive nodded slowly. She is right, he admitted. We have been planning from a distance. As more members chimed in, agreeing, questioning, reconsidering, something remarkable happened. Ava was no longer an outsider in the room. She was guiding it. By the end of the meeting, the board voted unanimously to adopt her recommendations as the new foundation for the project. When everyone filed out, Ethan turned to her, his voice low with genuine admiration. Ava, you changed the direction of this entire initiative. She felt her breath catch. I just spoke honestly. And sometimes, he said softly, that is exactly what changes everything. In the quiet that followed, Ava realized she was no longer standing on the edges of her life. She had stepped into something new, something she had thought belonged to other people. And for the first time, she felt she belonged too. The week that followed felt like a quiet sunrise spreading slowly across Ava's life, warming places that had been cold for far too long. Ward Tech moved forward with the revised community project, now shaped by her perspective, and word of the shift traveled quickly through the company. Some people were surprised, others intrigued, but no one debated the results. For the first time in months, progress was happening. On Friday afternoon, Ethan asked Ava to join him for a visit to one of the neighborhoods included in the project. They walked side by side past small storefronts and murals painted on brick walls, each carrying a story. Ethan listened intently as Ava explained the subtle details. The family-run shops struggling with rising rent, the local artists who painted to keep their stories alive, the small library that served as a meeting place for people who needed community more than anything. She had lived in places just like this, and she understood their heartbeat. Ethan, for all his intelligence, had never truly heard it until now. As the sun dipped below the buildings, they reached a community garden bordered by string lights that flickered on with the first touch of dusk. Children laughed in the distance, neighbors chatted over planters, and everything felt warm and rooted. Ava watched it all, her expression soft, reflective. This, she said quietly, is what people are trying to protect. Not just homes, not just businesses, but connection. Ethan nodded, his gaze lingering on her with a mix of admiration and something deeper, something he was only beginning to understand. Thank you, he said softly. She blinked. For what? For reminding me what leadership is supposed to look like. The words caught her by surprise, settling into her chest with a warmth that felt almost unreal. They walked back toward the car as night settled around them, city lights glowing in the distance. When they reached the curb, Ethan stopped, turning toward her with a sincerity that held steady even in the dim light. Ava, he said, his voice gentle but purposeful, I want you to stay involved. Not just as an advisor, but as a partner in this project. Her breath hitched. A partner. Yes. He took a small step closer. From the moment you helped me in the rain, you changed my direction without even knowing it. And everything you have done since has only confirmed that I was right to trust you. Ava felt the world tilt softly beneath her feet, not in the way that made her fear falling, but in the way that made her realize she was finally standing on solid ground. Are you sure? She whispered. I am, he said. I want to build this with you. The evening breeze rustled gently around them as she searched his face, searching for doubt, but finding none. Only sincerity, only respect, only a growing connection that neither of them had expected, yet both now fully recognized. Slowly, she nodded, a quiet smile unfolding like dawn. Then I will say yes. Relief washed across Ethan's expression, followed by a warmth that softened every sharp edge of his usually composed demeanor. Good, he said, his voice soft. Exhale. This is just the beginning. As they stood together beneath the glow of the streetlights, Ava realized that her life had not changed because she stepped into someone else's world. It changed because, for the first time, someone in power chose to step into hers. A small favor on a stormy night had led her here, not as someone rescued, but as someone finally seen. And as the lights shimmered around them, the partnership they formed felt less like a business decision and more like the first chapter of a story neither of them wanted to end.